Law enforcement officials believe multiple people could be charged in Matthew Perry's murder. That's right, you heard me right. This could be murder. And we got Christopher Melcher here to break it down. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore. So glad to have Christopher Melcher back. How you doing, sir?
Oh, it's great to be here, Andy.
I wish it was on another story because this one is a very depressing story. And I think a lot of us thought that this was just over. This tragedy happened, but we're learning now more that, yes, there could be several arrests made in Matthew Perry's death, which could have been murder. I want you to break this down for us. So this was what we thought was just sort of an accidental death in his hot tub or his pool at the end of the evening. But now we're learning that there are multiple suspects that the enforcement officers are looking into. Can you explain?
Sure. So the autopsy result revealed that Matthew Perry had enough ketamine in his system for general anesthesia, so enough to have been operated on. So obviously that was such a high dose that, it caused his death. And he had been under treatment by a psychiatrist and an anesthesiologist who was serving as his regular physician. And one or both of these doctors was treating him with ketamine on a therapeutic basis for depression. And the report had come out after his death that it might have been a week or maybe 10 days before his death that he had one of those treatments. So it kind of indicated that it wasn't a physician supplied dosage that he had received, and maybe he had got it elsewhere. And that's what really law enforcement is looking into. This is an investigation by LAPD, the U.S. Postal Service, DEA, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we're hearing reports that murder charges could be filed. And that's really what is happening in these cases where a drug dealer supplies a lethal dose of ketamine or fentanyl, heroin, other drugs like that, and to hold them really truly accountable for what their actions are, rather than just charging them with dealing drugs. These folks know of the deadly consequences of providing this much drugs to somebody. This isn't, therapeutic or recreational level amounts. It's enough to kill. And so they're really going after the chain here of supply. And this would be a murder charge. So they would be held responsible for murdering him by providing this lethal dosage of drugs when they knew of the deadly consequences.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably actually good news, guys, because we should be cracking down on this. And yeah, they talk about some of the former federal prosecutor mentions here, doctors are overprescribing and not seeing patients absolutely would be charged under this section. And so there's, I guess, what it's called doctor shopping, as we were looking at some of this, where it could have been Matthew or even a handler of Matthew was basically going around trying to get multiple doctors to prescribe him this and declare him depressed, whatever it is, so they could then, in theory, get more substances. And then also, it seems like sharing it over county lines. That was the other thing, right? Through the mail, if this stuff is sent, it becomes now mail fraud on top of it, where people are now getting these drugs illegally without actually being checked out. This is all very problematic, and you imagine could cause some actual arrests, you think?
Well, I hope so, because obviously this amount of drugs was not, administered in a hospital setting. He's in his jacuzzi self-administering it. And so people do need to be held accountable. Now, sure, Matthew Perry ultimately, would have ingested this stuff and would have also known, probably very well what he was doing. But he had a long time substance use problem. And sure, that was something he struggled with for a long time. But then we have other people supplying, these illicit drugs to him. So they need to be held accountable. And it's not just like, oh, he screwed up and he's responsible. No, there's other people who are. And I'm glad to see that law enforcement is taking it seriously like that, because there's so many stories of people like Matthew who aren't famous that we don't get to hear about, that don't get this level of attention. And it's only because he's famous that, they're really putting the might of the government down on this. But this is a very widespread problem, unfortunately.
Well, and this is sad because as he passed away, there was always reports that he was sober, he wasn't using, right? And so this is where things get more into the gray area of he wasn't using, but his handlers, his doctors were clearly over prescribing. Is there a version of this where it is sort of like, well, I was doing what the doctors told me. They told me I could take more of this, or this person's telling that. What do you think this does to the legacy? I mean, the Matthew Perry Foundation, the fact that he was out there, is this, does this hurt the story, right? The loss of Matthew Perry and that, oh, nope, see, he was sneaking off and getting ketamine. What is your opinion on that? Or do you blame more of these handlers and enablers for allowing him to have access to it?
Well, this is the thing, this is a disorder. This is something that, he struggled with. So it's not that, he was necessarily trying to harm himself. This is something that he had difficulty with, and people do on a lifelong basis. So they can be in treatment and recovery and sober, but still have these risks. So I don't blame him. But again, you have doctors, you have drug dealers, you have people who are involved in supplying drugs, and they need to be held accountable if they did something wrong. Now, there are therapeutic uses for ketamine for treatment of depression, which is what we're being told happened in this, the case of the medical provider. But obviously, this is a drug that is known to be used and abused recreationally, and that can cause death. So if they're the medical provider, they would be expected to have strict controls over how this would be administered. Could be like, come into the office and I will administer it to you. Or if it's going to be provided in very small doses so that it couldn't be all taken at once. This would be obviously wrong if they just said, here's a bag of this stuff and go have fun. That would be irresponsible, and the doctor would be charged under that circumstance. So again, there's going to be accountability here. I don't know if it's on the doctor's side yet because we haven't heard, what their involvement has been in this, if any. But certainly somebody provided this to him, and that's what they're looking at.
And this will take a while, right? I mean, I guess I'm looking up. It usually could take a year, and then it's state level, federal level. But they've been doing this for it'll be almost a year soon. What do you expect the next steps are?
Well, because we're hearing all this reporting of charges being likely, it does appear that this has gained momentum, and we may be at the stage where charges could be filed. I would imagine that the targets of this investigation have already been contacted, have already had lawyers. They're trying to negotiate, trying to minimize. And that's what a game that prosecutors play is once they have their case ready to go, they'll contact the targets and they'll say, here's what we got. Here's what we're going to do. And you want to cooperate? We'll make you a deal right now in exchange for testimony, truthful testimony against the others. And so they're probably in those final stages of seeing who's going to flip. And, whoever doesn't is going to get charged.
Interesting. This will be definitely something to follow. Obviously, we want to make sure the truth is revealed. If you guys want to follow, subscribe here, but also make sure you follow Christopher Melcher over on Twitter at CA_divorce. Always a pleasure, sir. I hope we get this sorted out. It was a massive loss, and his legacy lives on through his foundation. But yeah, if someone was helping to keep this habit going or overprescribed, they need to be held accountable. And I'm glad that it seems like this may happen. So stay tuned here. Make sure you hit that subscribe if you haven't already. We will keep you covered. Thank you guys so much for watching here on Popcorn Planet.